This meeting of the Norwood City Council is hereby called to order. Please rise for the prayer and the Pledge of Allegiance. Our Father, who art in heaven,
we congregate in these council chambers. We pray for thy divine guidance, that we may do all things well, according to thy holy will. Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Good evening. I'm Leslie Stevenson, and I'm President Pro Tem of Council, serving tonight over the meeting. Donna Lake is not able to be with us. She is with her family. In just a moment, I'm going to ask that you all stand again with me. We have several folks who have passed in our community that we would like to acknowledge. Donna submitted these and asked that we would have a moment of silence for Helen Jaspers, a longtime nurse at Norwood Health Department, William Schmidt, a retired Norwood police officer, and Nestor Stroud, pastor at Norwood Church. If we could please have a moment of silence. Thank you.
Yes.
Would you please call the roll?
Mr. Bonzall.
Present.
Mr. Clark.
Present.
Mr. Thompson.
Here.
Ms. Stevenson.
Here.
Mrs. Hanrahan.
Here.
Mr. Sanker.
Here.
Mr. Breeden.
Here.
All members are present. We do have several requests to amend the agenda, so please bear with me as I read through these changes. We have a letter from the mayor currently listed. We have a communication from the mayor of a proclamation regarding Cumulus Radio that I am proposing we move right after the approval of the minutes. We have the removal of the report from the Housing, Health, and Public Safety Committee. And I'd like to propose we add a letter from Mayor Williams regarding request committee of the whole meeting to communication number 1. I think that is all. Mr. Sanker.
Yes, Madam President Pro Tem, as long as those are all the changes we need at this point in time, I recommend they be instated, placed on the agenda as stated.
There a second, Mrs. Hanrahan. Any discussion? I do want to ask members of council, are we all in agreement to keep moving forward with the ordinance creating the retiree benefit program tonight? I know there were some last minute changes moving forward, okay? The motion on the floor is to amend the agenda. Was there more discussion, Mr. Sanker?
I was going to say in regards to that, I guess when we get to that point on the agenda, we could move it to, if we so choose, to move it to the next meeting or a time certain. So versus removing it right now.
Mr. Bonsall?
Yeah, thank you, Madam President Pro Tem. I would agree with previous councilperson that we definitely have the option. We'll talk about this then, but the change that was emailed out was very minor. It's important, but it was just a couple word changes, so I'm fine with whatever council decides on that tonight.
Mr. Sanker?
Also, along with that, in the event that there may be some retirees here that may want to address those issues, if we removed it, then they wouldn't be able to speak on a council agenda item. So we'll leave it open for now.
Okay. Any more discussion on the change of proposed amendments to the agenda? Call the roll, please.
Mr. Bonzal.
Yes.
Mr. Clark.
Yes.
Mr. Thompson.
Yes.
Ms. Stevenson.
Yes.
Mrs. Hanahan.
Yes.
Mr. Sanker.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Breeden.
Yes, sir.
Okay, moving along to the minutes of previous meetings. We have 2 items here. The first is April 10, 2018, and I believe there was a copy just delivered to our desk. Mrs. Hanrahan.
Thank you, Madam President Pro Tem. I would like to move that we defer this again until the next meeting, since we just got these changes when council started. And I don't think anyone's had a chance to look over them.
Mr. Bonsall?
Well, I would just say, are you referring just to the April 10th minutes?
Yes.
Okay. I'll second that.
Okay. Is there any more discussion? Mr. Bonsall?
Yeah, thank you, Madam President Pro Tem. So if we recall at the last meeting, the April 10th minutes, there was some questions about, different items in there. And we did get a revised copy, I think, yesterday. I had time to review it. I had some proposed changes myself to the edit. So, the Clerk of Council just sent that out at 7:15 to our email. So I agree with Mrs. Hanrahan that we should defer this until the next meeting.
Is there any more discussion? Is there any more discussion? Okay. So the motion on the floor is to defer the minutes until the next regular meeting.
Just
Mr. Sanker.
the April 10th meeting. April 10th minutes, yep.
Yes, just the April 10th. We're just on item 1. So the motion on the floor is to defer the April 10 minutes until the next regular meeting, defer the approval. Okay. Call the roll, please.
Mr. Bonzal.
Yes.
Mr. Clark.
Yes.
Mr. Thompson.
Yes.
Ms. Stevenson.
Yes.
Mrs. Hanahan.
Yes.
Mr. Sanker.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Breeden.
Yes, sir.
Okay, the second item under minutes of a previous meeting are for April 24th, 2018. Mr. Bonsall.
Yeah, I move that these minutes be approved.
Mrs. Hanrahan, you second that?
Second.
All right, is there any discussion? Okay, call the roll, please.
Mr. Bonzal.
Yes.
Mr. Clark.
Yes.
Mr. Thompson.
Yes.
Ms. Stevenson.
Yes.
Mrs. Hanahan.
Yes.
Mr. Sanker.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Breeden.
Yes, sir.
All right, so all members present voting yes, the motion passes. We do have a request to address council, but it is not on an agenda item. Just making sure I didn't miss any of those. So we'll move on to the reports of standing committees. And the second item, now being the first, is economic development and community engagement regarding committee goals.
Do you want to do the proclamation?
Oh, I'm so sorry. Yes, we did make that change. Thank you. I didn't make the note on that large enough. Mrs. Hanrahan, do you have the proclamation that you would like to present?
Yes.
Okay, and we'd like to call up the members of Cumulus Radio.
Is there a letter from the mayor?
Pardon?
Is there a letter from the mayor?
I was told that you had that to read. Is it in? Should be here.
So, do you want to ask that the clerk read the letter?
Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Bonsall. Mr. Gears, would you read the letter of request for the agenda item?
Dear President of Council and members of Council, on the agenda tonight is a proclamation that honors Cumulus Radio for their valiant effort to help the citizens of Norwood during the August 28th, 2016 flood. I will not be attending the council meeting tonight, but I am requesting that Ward 2 Councilwoman Marilyn Hanrahan read the proclamation. If not for Mrs. Hanrahan's persistence, that Cumulus Radio be recognized for their generosity and major contribution during the flood, their efforts may have gone unnoticed. Sincerely, Thomas F. Williams, Mayor, City of Norwood.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. I just want to say that I became aware that this was overlooked, and I wanted to apologize, and as soon as I became aware of it, I started working with my President of Council, Donna Lake, who apologizes for not being here, and the mayor, and we decided that it's never too late to say thank you, and that's really what we want to do here. So if I could introduce you, this is Keith Mitchell. Correct. Let me get the names right. Tina Kleiman. Right. Vinnie Moses. And I'm so sorry. That's it, the first one on there. Crow. I'm so sorry. Thank you very much. So I will read this proclamation from the mayor. Give it to you there. It says, City of Norwood, Office of the Mayor Proclamation. Whereas on August 28, 2016, the City of Norwood experienced a dangerous and destructive flood that threatened lives, destroyed homes, vehicles, and the way of life for many Norwood residents. And whereas the Norwood community banded together to help their neighbors to overcome this disaster, however, they were not alone in their fight. And whereas Cumulus Radio is a caring corporate citizen of the City of Norwood and one of those who stepped up to assist their Norwood neighbors by collecting supplies and donations at their Cumulus Radio site on Montgomery Road and Joseph E. Sanker Boulevard. And whereas Cumulus Radio was instrumental in making great strides for our community to come back from the damage that was done by the flood. And whereas the City of Norwood wishes to thank and honor Cumulus Radio, and particularly Market Manager Dave Crow, Market Controller Tina Kleiman, Operations Manager Keith Mitchell, and Director of Promotions Vinnie Moses, and the staffs of WFTK-FM, WGRR-FM, WNNF-FM, WOFX-FM, and WRRM-FM, who were kind enough to give their time, effort, talent, and heart to help our Norwood community. And now, therefore, I, Thomas F. Williams, by virtue of the authority vested in me as mayor of the City of Norwood, State of Ohio, do hereby proclaim Tuesday, May 8th, 2018, as Cumulus Radio Day in the City of Norwood, Ohio. And witness whereof I do hereunto set my hand and cause the seal of the City of Norwood, Ohio to be affixed this 8th day of May in the year of our Lord 2018. Mayor Thomas Williams.
Sure. Thank you very much. We really appreciate this. There's a lot more than the four of us, but we represent the management departments that quickly gathered on that night. I drove in on that night of the 28th, and I'd never seen anything like that in my life. I think it took me, I know every back way to get into the City of Norwood, but I had to cut through ways through St. Bernard that I didn't know. So, but we pulled together. We were on the air that night. We were like, we have to do something right away. So everybody here pulled together. We got all our staffs together. If all the staff was here, we could fill up the whole room of all the people who pitched in and gave their time that day. We had corporate partners who were also part of it. So we're part of Norwood. We've been here for 9 years. We just signed a new lease. We're going to be here for a lot longer. We're part of this community, and we felt it was important that we use the power of radio to help the people that really needed help in a dire situation. So we thank you for the proclamation, and if you ever need us again, you just let us know. We're right down the street, and we're here to help.
Thank you. Mr. Sanker?
Did any of the other ones want to say anything? You're more than welcome to. I would like to say thank you on behalf of the community, because it did mean a lot, and it was an unprecedented storm that came through here that affected just not here but the surrounding communities. And when you see the devastation that amount of rain in that short a time had, it was tremendous. And so we truly do appreciate all your help. Not only that, we appreciate you guys and girls being over there across the street, and it works out well. The only thing I apologize for is that Tuesday, May 8th is almost over. And if you and your staff would have known that you had the run of the city for all day long.
Now, I told them at a meeting today, we got free lunch at any restaurant in Norwood. They're going to feed us for free.
So anyhow, but we appreciate you being here, and well deserved.
Well, it's our pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
We'll celebrate next year.
There you go.
Thank you.
Mr. Bonsall?
Yeah, I'd also just like to express my thanks for the work that you all did. And so, just like Marilyn, I was there as well, just looking at all the stuff that you all collected and helping to bring it over. I mean, Marilyn did truckloads of stuff. We all brought stuff over to the Vineyard Central Church. And so it meant a lot, because not every radio station in the greater Cincinnati area truly treated us well during that time. And so the fact that you all stepped up and that you all took care of the city that you all were in, it truly is appreciated. So thank you so much for being here and for everything that you all did.
You're very welcome.
Thank you. Very good.
Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, Ben.
Okay, thanks a lot. Thank you very much.
Well deserved.
Good night. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Motion to receive and file the letter.
Oh, good point. At this time, could we have a motion to receive and file the letter? Mr. Clark?
So moved to receive and file the letter.
Mr. Bonsall?
I'll second that.
Second that. Call a roll, please.
Mr. Bonzall.
Yes.
Mr. Clark.
Yes.
Mr. Thompson.
Yes.
Ms. Stevenson.
Yes.
Mrs. Hannerhan.
Yes.
Mr. Sanker.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Breeden.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. All. Okay, I think we are on to the reports of standing committees of council now. And the one there is the Economic Development and Community Engagement, which I will read. To the Honorable Council of the City of Norwood, Ohio, we, your Committee of Economic Development and Community Engagement, to whom it was referred, our committee goals, beg leave to submit the following report. The following committee goals were discussed. 1, welcome to Norwood. Our goal is to create a welcome experience which informs our neighbors about resources, opportunities, and responsibilities of residency in our city. We will collaborate with web consultants to update the website and seek business sponsorship for tangible products, too. Next steps include gaining feedback from residents, drafting content for a welcome book, and confirming sponsorship. We will have updates for the June 7th meeting. Second goal, small business in Norwood. Our goal is to compile, create, and promote resources to support residents who generate revenue in our city. The priority is to attract and retain businesses that can use vacancies by working alongside infill developers to revitalize our Montgomery Road corridor. Myself, along with City Planner Greg Orrs, are going to draft and send letters to local organizations to better understand their interest in working with the city on a plan, potentially including a community entertainment district application. All members of the committee are asked to review the economic development process, which is a draft document for possible consideration. Discussion will continue in June. Number 3, neighborhood associations in Norwood. Our goal is to coordinate an approach for resident voice to help prioritize decisions council and administration are making. As a part of the quality of life planning process, residents will have an opportunity to organize themselves based on work groups of interest. This committee's goal will be tabled, number 3 that is, until the results of the June 23rd report out and visioning session occur. Number 4, community engagement in Norwood. Our goal is to increase transparency about development projects and upcoming changes within the city. To accomplish this goal, we will seek routine updates on development projects, invite administrators, developers, and business owners to share at meetings, and coordinate online communication via websites and social media. Our fifth goal is quality of life in Norwood. Our goal is to collaborate with this Quality of Life Steering Committee to elevate residents' ideas for strengthening the city. We will hold committee time for reports from that committee and for the public to become aware of the process, next steps, and how to get involved in a city planning process. Any questions about the report or ideas regarding economic development and community engagement are welcome via email. My email address is lstevenson@norwood-ohio.com. Again, that's lstevenson@norwood-ohio.com, or via phone message at 513-458-4594. Mr. Braden?
I'd like to vote the committee report be received and filed.
Mr. Thompson? Is there any discussion? Call the roll, please.
Mr. Bonzo?
Yes.
Mr. Clark?
Yes.
Mr. Thompson?
Yes.
Ms. Stevenson?
Yes.
Mrs. Hanrahan?
Yes.
Mr. Sanker?
Yes, sir.
Mr. Breeden?
Yes.
All right, thank you, everybody. There are no third readings of ordinances. Our next agenda item is introductory readings of ordinances. The first item being ordinance creating the retiree benefit program. Mr. Bonsall.
Thank you so much, Madam President Pro Tem. I move that we have the first reading of the ordinance.
Mr. Sanker.
I'll second it, but I have a question under discussion.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Sanker. Go ahead for discussion.
Should we add the application forms, the revised ones, or would they just be part of this?
Yeah, so
Can I ask, Mr. Moore, can you speak to that? And then if we need more clarity.
Thank you, Madam President Pro Tem. Yeah, council can slip in these, the different application or registration forms is fine with me. And I'm not sure exactly where we were in this. This is why we've had a number of drafts of these things, and then it was the ordinance, and then it was the council worked on the notification and the forms that would go with it, and then trying to incorporate back the different versions of forms back into the ordinance. So a first reading and no more than a first reading is a good idea, so everybody has a chance to look through it again. And I may have had the wrong forms. I think the only differences were the line, were you a member of the C9 Viva Millennium Plan programs last year? And at
Which document is that?
That's the application. And there's that question is there. It's not on the form that was attached to the ordinance that you have. And part of that was the question of, well, you don't have to have been a member of it last year or the previous year before you can apply, because there are current employees that are not members of those that would be eligible at the point they retire. And then the other one was a retiree employed prior to January 1st, 75 versus did you work the whole year of January 1st, 75? These are both pretty minor, but if those are the versions you want to go with, it's fine. It's probably best to substitute those in now before the first reading, because if that's what you want the forms to be, then that's what they should be as far as the thing. As far as the change, again, the ordinance says substantially similar, so making those changes afterward wouldn't be the end of the world, but it's probably best everybody be on the same page at this point.
Mr. Bonsall. Thank you, Mr. Moore.
Thank you so much, Madam President Pro Tem. Yes, I'd like to amend my motion and include that the forms that the Donna Lake sent out are the ones that we'd like to use.
I would recommend separating those two motions. First, do the motion to substitute those in, and then, if we're going to do that by motion, and then have a separate motion entirely about the first reading.
So,
Mr. Bonsall.
okay, so I would like to make a motion to amend the previous motion to add the two forms that Donna Lake has provided us via email.
You want to withdraw your motion and make a new one, right?
Okay, so that's fine. Okay. So we're going to withdraw the original motion. Sorry, I misunderstood, Mr. Moore, what you said. So let's withdraw the original motion, if Mr. Sanker's okay with that.
Mr. Sanker, would you withdraw your second?
Yes, madam.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you so much.
Mr.
Sanker.
Bonsall, would you like to make a new motion?
I would like to make a new motion.
Okay.
I'd like to move that we have the first reading of the ordinance with the two forms.
Substitute first.
Okay, I'd like to, we are substituting the forms for, that Donna Lake sent out into the ordinance and then having the first reading of it.
Just the substitution, and then we'll come back to the first reading. So the first motion should be to do the substitution, and we'll vote on that. And if council decides to do the substitution, then we'll do the motion for the first reading.
Okay, as Mr. Moore stated.
Is there a second? Mr. Sanker?
Madam President, I would like to second the motion to add the two new forms that were received today to this ordinance.
Okay, so the motion on the floor is to substitute the current attachments to the ordinance for what was distributed via email, which had the corrected language. Is there any discussion, Mrs. Hanrahan?
No, Madam President Pro Tem, would you please speak up? Not everybody can hear you.
I am as close to the mic as I can bend. I'm not sure. Okay. Oh, see, they're on now. Thank you. I'm right up against this desk. Thank you for making me aware. I'm hopeful that the room can hear now. And the folks at home, thank you very much. So the motion on the floor is to substitute the current appendices for the updated documents that were provided via email. Is there any discussion? Okay, call the roll, please.
Mr. Bonzo.
Yes.
Mr. Clark.
Yes.
Mr. Thompson.
Yes.
Ms. Stevenson.
Yes.
Mrs. Hanrahan.
Yes.
Mr. Sanker.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Breeden.
Yes, sir.
Okay, all members voting yes, that motion passes. Is there a motion to consider the revised ordinance? Mr. Bonsall.
Thank you, Madam President Pro Tem. I move that we have the first reading of the revised ordinance.
Mr. Sanker.
I'd like to second that motion, Madam President.
All right, is there any discussion? Mr. Thompson.
Yeah, I just wanted to point out, reading through on page 2, section 5A, second to last sentence, I think we've got a wrong date there. It just says March 1st, 2018. I believe it's supposed to be March 1st, 2019. Since 2018, March 1st is already passed. So I just, as long as we're making some updates, I thought we'd just fix that.
I'm sorry, what page?
Page 2, under section 5A, second to last sentences, it says third notice and application form shall be sent no later than March 1st, 2018.
We're going to be doing it in a minute.
All right. I got it.
Thank you, Mr. Thompson. Is there any more discussion? Mr. Moore?
Yes, Madam President. So is that a motion to amend the ordinance then? I can come back with a clean copy next time and we can, start over, or at this point, if that's a change, and yeah, you're right. We want to make a motion to amend the ordinance, and that would kind of be the thing.
Mr. Thompson?
A motion that we amend the ordinance then to include the correct date.
Does the first reading have to be withdrawn?
I was getting ready to say that. I think we...
Should be.
Mr. Bonsall and Mr. Sanker, would you like to withdraw your motion to have the first reading of the ordinance? I see agreement. Okay. Mr. Thompson?
Sorry.
No worries. This is great. Go ahead.
The motion that we revise the ordinance to include the correct date of March 1st, 2019 on section 5, paragraph A.
Mr. Braden, do you second that motion? Is there any discussion? If we're, Mr. Moore, if we're considering this motion and it passes, do we need to have a supplemental motion to say we'd like to defer this to another meeting? Or is that assumed in the motion?
No, if the motion to amend the ordinance is passed, and then it'll be up to council to decide whether to vote on the ordinance as amended.
Thank you.
And because it's a small enough amendment, he doesn't need to present his amendment in writing. If it's more than a couple words, he needs to present his amendment in writing with lots of copies, so.
Okay, so the motion on the floor, was there any more discussion?
Any more typos?
Okay, so the motion on the floor is to consider the amended ordinance with the corrected date, March 1, 2019.
The motion is to amend the ordinance.
Yeah, motion is to amend the ordinance.
Yes. Would you call the roll, please?
Mr. Bonzall.
Yes.
Mr. Clark.
Yes.
Mr. Thompson.
Yes.
Ms. Stevenson.
Yes.
Mrs. Hanahan.
Yes.
Mr. Sanker.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Breeden.
Yes, sir.
Okay. All members present voting yes, the motion passes to amend the ordinance. Thank you.
James, go.
Mr. Bonsall.
Thank you, Madam President. I move that we have the first reading of the amended ordinance.
Mr. Thompson.
Second that.
All righty. Any discussion? Okay. Can we please have the first reading?
Call the roll.
Oh, so sorry, call the roll. We've been doing that a lot.
Mr. Bonzall.
Yes.
Mr. Clark.
Yes.
Mr. Thompson.
Yes.
Ms. Stevenson.
Yes.
Mrs. Hanahan.
Yes.
Mr. Sanker.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Breeden.
Yes, sir.
Ordinance creating the retiree benefit program as amended.
Thank you. Our second ordinance, I think is where we're at. Okay, is to an ordinance repealing ordinance 66-2000 as amended, which provided for health care insurance for retirees, employees who are no longer employed with the city due to disability, and employees who had completed a cumulative total of 20 years of honorable service and declaring an emergency. Mr. Clark.
Move that we have the first reading of this ordinance.
Mr. Breeden.
I second that.
Is there any discussion? No, okay. Call the roll, please.
Mr. Bonzall.
Yes.
Mr. Clark.
Yes.
Mr. Thompson.
Yes.
Ms. Stevenson.
Yes.
Mrs. Hanahan.
Yes.
Mr. Sanker.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Breeden.
Yes, sir.
Ordinance repealing Ordinance 66-2000 as amended, which provided for health care insurance for retirees, employees who are no longer employed with the city due to disability, and employees who had completed a cumulative total of 20 years of honorable service and declaring an emergency.
Our third agenda item under introductory readings of ordinances is ordinance terminating Vivo plan and trust agreement and declaring an emergency. Mr. Clark.
I move that we have the first reading of this ordinance as well.
Mr. Breeden.
I second that motion.
Is there any discussion? Seeing none, would you call the roll, please?
Mr. Bonzall.
Yes.
Mr. Clark.
Yes.
Mr. Thompson.
Yes.
Ms. Stevenson.
Yes.
Mrs. Hanahan.
Yes.
Mr. Sanker.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Breeden.
Yes, sir.
Ordinance terminating VIBA plan and trust agreement and declaring an emergency.
Thank you. Our next agenda item is second readings of resolutions. We have one item, resolution authorizing an agreement with Great Lakes Recycling Incorporated, DBA Simple Recycling. Mr. Bonsall.
Thank you, Madam President Pro Tem. I move we have the second reading of the resolution.
Seconded by Mr. Thompson. Is there any discussion? Mr. Bonsall.
Thank you, Madam President Pro Tem. So I just wanted to remind everybody, I know we've talked about this before, but and just let the citizens know at home that this agreement will cost the city $0. And in fact, it's actually going to be able to provide just some small revenue to the city that we can use based on the total amount of collections. So there's lots of benefits here, and just it's going to be a great service for our citizens. So.
Thank you, Mr. Bonsall. Is there any other discussion? Seeing none, call the roll, please.
Mr. Bonzo.
Yes.
Mr. Clark.
Yes.
Mr. Thompson.
Yes.
Ms. Stevenson.
Yes.
Mrs. Hanahan.
Yes.
Mr. Sanker.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Breeden.
Yes, sir.
Please have the reading.
A resolution authorizing an agreement with Great Lakes Recycling, Inc., DBA Simple Recycling.
Thank you. Our next agenda item is introductory readings of resolutions. We have one item. Final resolution authorizing the Service Safety Director to enter into a contract with the State of Ohio Department of Transportation to complete highway project using safe routes to school funds. Mr. Bonsall?
Thank you so much, Madam President Pro Tem. I move that we have all 3 readings of the resolution.
Mr. Clark?
Second.
Is there any discussion? Mr. Bonsall?
Thank you so much, Madam President Pro Tem. I'd like to ask maybe through the chair to the law director if he might be willing to explain, I guess, just how, the origin of the resolution and just for people at home.
Mr. Moore?
Thank you, Madam President Pro Tem. Yeah, this is, again, another this year's annual installment of the Safe Routes to School grant program. I couldn't tell you at the top of my head exactly what this year's version is. This is the resolution we get from the state that says, pass this or you get no money. So here's where we are.
Mr. Thompson?
Just, I had a question, just because I wasn't on council last January, when we enacted the legislation proposing the original cooperation with the Director of Transportation. What happened then, and why is it that now we are 15, 16 months ahead of there? I don't understand that part of the process.
Mr. Moore?
Thank you, Madam President. The way I understand it is it's a multi-year grant, and so, this work in front of Williams is done in the first year, and the work over here at View is done this year, and I think it's kind of staggered. I'm not sure if it goes school by school or different parts of it at different places, but that's the idea. It's not all supposed to be done in one year. It's done in installments, and so each year we go through the paperwork process again in order to do this year's chunk of it.
And that's probably just referencing then last year's.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Bonsall?
Yeah, thank you, Madam President Pro Tem. So in, the title of the resolution, it mentions a highway project using Safe Routes to School funds. And I just also want to reassure our residents that we are not using these Safe Routes to School funds to do any type of street repaving or any type of highway project. The reason why it says highway project is because we have state routes in Ohio that go through Norwood. So State Route 561 is in front of Norwood View and Sharpsburg Elementary. And then there are going to be some improvements to Montgomery Road, which is State Route 3. And so I have a feeling that a lot of these funds that communities get are like out in rural areas, and so like they probably do call them state highways, whereas we really call them our streets or state routes. But that's kind of the reason. And so the way that the project is described here, and I'm just going to read just this paragraph, is that the project consists of construction and installation of curb ramps, pedestrian signals, school zone and warning signs, speed humps, curb bump outs, and upgrade pavement markings lying with the city of Norwood. And so the changes, actually, for the 2 times that we've received Safe Routes to School grants, we've been awarded grant money. They're about $400,000 each year. We actually haven't had, none of those improvements have been made yet. There's been a lot of engineering work, and they actually decided just to combine the 2 years into one. So at some point, I think it's going to be this summer, it might be a little bit later, but there's going to be a blitz of work, $800,000 worth of work to really upgrade the school signs, the flashing beacons, the, just The crosswalks are going to be really more international standard crosswalks that have almost like the zebra stripes is kind of what they're going to look like. So it's really exciting that we're going to have this done. It's really exciting that the city of Norwood's not going to have to pay any, there's no matching grant that the city has to pay, that the state of Ohio covers. The state of Ohio covers the match for us. So it's all good news, and I just want to make sure that we thank Deb Robeson and Council President Donna Lake, who has, they've worked really hard on this, and very many people at the city, including the law department, has as well. So just thank you for them, and I know our kids are going to thank you too.
Thank you, Mr. Bonsall. Any more discussion? I believe the motion on the floor is to suspend the rules and have all 3 readings of the resolution. Call the roll, please.
Mr. Bonzo.
Yes.
Mr. Clark.
Yes.
Mr. Thompson.
Yes.
Ms. Stevenson.
Yes.
Mrs. Hanrahan.
Yes.
Mr. Sanker.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Breeden.
Yes, sir.
Final resolution authorizing the Service Safety Director to enter into a contract with the State of Ohio Department of Transportation to complete highway project using safe routes to school funds. Final resolution authorizing the Service Safety Director to enter into a contract with the State of Ohio Department of Transportation to complete highway project using safe routes to school funds. Final resolution authorizing the Service Safety Director to enter into a contract with the State of Ohio Department of Transportation to complete highway project using safe routes to school funds.
Mr. Bonsall.
Yeah, thank you, Madam President Pro Tem. I move that the resolution be passed.
Mr. Clark, I saw your hand.
I'll second that motion.
Is there any discussion? I have one question for you, Mr. Moore. The second page of the ordinance says that a fully executed copy of the resolution is supposed to be transmitted to the Director of Transportation. And just want to make sure that we're clear before we vote, that does that need to be a separate request, or is that understood that for just the law department to act on that?
That's actually, as far as transmitting certified copies of ordinances, would come from the clerk's office, but we don't need a separate motion on that.
Thank you. So just to be clear, the clerk's office, if this is approved, when this is approved, will send a copy of this to the Director of Transportation. So the motion on the floor. Mr. Bonsall, can you repeat your motion?
Yep, the motion is to approve the resolution.
To pass the resolution. Thank you. Is there any more discussion? Okay, call the roll, please.
Mr. Bonzo.
Yes.
Mr. Clark.
Yes.
Mr. Thompson.
Yes.
Ms. Stevenson.
Yes.
Mrs. Hanrahan.
Yes.
Mr. Sanker.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Breeden.
Yes, sir.
All members present voting yes. The resolution passes. All right, so based on our amendments here, we don't have any administrative reports. We do have other requests to address council, and that is Sergeant Tim Buchanan.
Well, we do have a letter from the mayor.
That was moved under communication. That's our first communication item. Yeah,
That's the one under communication one.
Oh, communication.
The other one was already received and filed with the proclamation.
yes, thank you. Great work, team. Sergeant Buchanan, thank you. If you would give us your name and address.
Tim Buchanan, Sergeant, North Police Department, 4701 Montgomery Road.
William Kramer, 4701 Montgomery Road.
Thank you for being here tonight. It says you'd like to discuss police department topics.
First off, I want to thank the council for the welcome I got last time I was in here. It was very good. Nerve-wracking trying to come up here and start a communication with everybody, and it worked out well. The input, the emails that I received after the meeting, I think those were invaluable, and I hope they continue, because the more we can talk to each other, the more times that we can go back and forth and give our ideas, the better this is going to work out. Ms. Hanrahan, thank you for riding last weekend. I believe that the more you guys come in and experience what we're doing, the more understanding, the better it's going to be as far as the working relationship between the department and the council. I don't know if you wanted to say anything about your time riding?
Thank you for having me, and I would just like to stress to every council member in here, please go ride with the police department. It's an eye-opener on many different fronts. I had, the second time I've done it, the first time it snowed, a lot of snow, no activity out there. This time it rained, so I'm going to go out again. But I really do think everybody on council needs to go out and work with these police officers and see what they're doing.
Thank you. I'll start with our stats for April. We had 2,735 calls for service in April alone. 1,565 of those were officer-initiated. The traffic stops, the well checks, the home checks, those type of things. Over the month of April, we made 80 runs that were theft offenses, whether that's for a business, for breaking into cars, stolen cars, you name it. There were 80 theft offenses or runs reports that we responded to in the month of April. Along with the officer-initiated things, in April, 118 traffic citations were issued in April alone in the city streets. We talked last month about the overdose problems with the heroin and that. Over the month of April, we had 8 overdose runs in the police department. I think I alluded to the fact that I think those numbers are getting better from what it was 6 or 8 or 10 months ago. I think if we look back at those numbers would be double or triple that. So I do believe that those numbers are coming down. Unfortunately, within April, 2 of those runs resulted in the death of somebody. So it's still a crisis, it's still something we have to continue to work on. But that's where we are with that point. Our hiring process, we are one step further than we were last month. Interviews are done. We have a list of viable candidates into the chief's office, and then soon I think we'll be going forward with a...
Yeah, I will shortly here forward the names to the Safety Service Director, requesting that they receive conditional offers of employment. At that point, they just have to pass their psychological and physical medical evaluation. So
I was part of the interview process, and I assure you we have some very, very good candidates coming through the door. We have some experienced guys coming in. We have some guys coming right out of the academy with some local products. We have a Norwood graduate on the list. So I think coming as we go forward, I think we're going to do well this time around. I want to talk to you about Officer Dan Riffle. Dan's been a police officer with Norwood for 5.5 years. Recently, with the exit of several of our experienced officers, positions were opened up in our investigations unit. Dan put in for this unit. Dan, he really separated himself from the other candidates. The other candidates were good candidates, nothing against them, but Dan separated himself. He showed initiative to learn more about that side of the job before he ever stepped into that job. He has worked well with the investigators on his own reports, stuff that he was able to follow up on, and he would spend time after working third shift hours to wait until the investigators came in at 8 o'clock, and he would sit and talk with them about his reports and how he could better follow up on his things. He made a very big impact with our investigators at that point. He was placed in his new role as a detective, and since that time, he has become a very vital role in our detective's office. He was very instrumental in solving a bank robbery, was able to work with other officers, other departments. I believe he worked with some federal units in trying to identify the suspect. Eventually, the suspect was identified and was indicted in Hamilton County Grand Jury. So Dan's been doing a very good job for quite a while here, and I want to say congratulations to our newest detective, Detective Dan Riffle. Okay, I'm done with my stuff. If you guys have any questions.
Mrs. Hanrahan?
Thank you. I would just like to echo what we had said last week, that when you have promotions, swearing in, things like that, that you inform council so that we know this is happening, because several of us would like to attend.
Anything, Mr. Sanker?
Real quick question. A couple weeks ago, they had like a national prescription drug turn-in day on a Saturday. Do we have that as like an ongoing process where if somebody stumbles across something or you got
We do.
old medications, can the residents just turn those in at any time to the police department, or are there only specific days like that one Saturday when they were taking
It's
them
open
around?
24 hours. If they come into the police department in our lobby, we have a drop box. Certain rules are written, and they don't want packaging and all that, but they want the pills contained, or whatever medicines contained. But there's a drop box in our lobby at their discretion, or when they can come in and do it, they can turn it in. No problems, nothing, no questions asked.
Good, thank you.
Thanks. Again, I'll reiterate what Tim said. We appreciate you, communicating with us and letting us have this time. Now, I'll thank Tim too. Sergeant Buchanan came to me a while ago and asked for permission to come to council and kind of give updates on what's going on with the police department. And at the time, I told him to kind of hang on because there was talk about having kind of department head meetings. I know that kind of got tabled for the time being. So I went back to Tim. I said, I think it's a good idea. Let's go ahead and go forward with it. So Tim's been really passionate about this, and I appreciate the work that he's put in, kind of developing dialogue with council. So I just have a couple things. Tim, did you ever tell them about Dave Dongan? So I do want to recognize another officer while I'm up here. Dave Dongan is a night shift officer. He's been with us, I think, about 10 years. Sounds about right. And does a great job. He came from, I think, a department in Kentucky, if I remember correctly. But point of my story is he, maybe 2 months ago, sent me an email saying, hey, he would like to look at purchasing security cameras that we could give to residents who maybe don't have access to one or resources to obtain one. And he said they could take money out from the Norwood Police Association, which is a nonprofit group that we have, the Pigs and Pins and so forth. So Dave did all the research on it, purchased, I think, 2 cameras. Does that sound right? And we put them up for use for people that were having, chronic problems with people maybe damaging their cars. We haven't caught anybody yet, but they've been a deterrent. So that was a great idea from Dave that he, came up with, and I just think it shows really good initiative to try to find another way to solve some of the problems out there. So thanks to Dave Dongan for that. Tim mentioned the overdoses, and I'll just give you a little further information on that. Tim's right, is that let's start with the positive. So I ran the numbers. 2017 up until May 8th, to today's date, we had 57 overdose runs. Up until today's date, in 2018, we have only had 39. So that's a positive. The number of overdoses have gone down. The negative is that in 2017, we had a total of 7 overdose deaths. In 2018 so far this year, we have 5. So we're not even halfway through the year, and we've almost hit last year's total. And I'm not an expert on it by any means, but I think a lot of that just has to do with the fentanyl and carfentanil that is being mixed with it, and it's just making it more likely that people are going to die when they overdose. So that's all I've got for you right now. If you have any questions for me while I'm up here.
Mr. Bonsall?
Yes, thank you, Madam President Pro Tem. So I'm curious, can you comment on the drug unit and whether we have enough officers yet to be able to reestablish that?
We don't. And I mean, that would be a priority once we get some more officers hired, is to reestablish the drug unit. I can tell you, because I've listened in the past when we had a drug unit to some of the wires when they were talking to people and try to set up drug deals, and you would hear them say, I'm not coming into Norwood. Norwood's hot. The cops are everywhere. We're not coming in there. And we don't have that deterrent anymore. So it's important that we get it back, and as soon as we have the numbers to do it, we will definitely get it back.
Mr. Bonsall?
Yeah, thank you, Madam President Pro Tem. So I'm curious then on, because staffing is something that's a huge concern of mine, so I'm very happy to hear that you're hiring additional ones. I mean, anytime we get more officers on the street, it's always good, especially when we're replacing the ones that have left. So I guess I was just curious about like the number of officers versus the number of people, like I guess in leadership. Like, I'm not sure what the ratio is, but is the ratio appropriate? Do we have enough officers on the street? Is there, I mean, if you look at other departments that are like us, do they have as many lieutenants and sergeants and other leadership that?
I couldn't speak to each department in Hamilton County, and I honestly, I haven't looked. I've gone through some of the SERB contracts to kind of see, but they don't have the table of organization in the contract, so I don't know. I mean, I would have to call around. So we have 15 supervisors right now, and we have, I think, 24 police officers.
I think with the next time, we're supposed to hire up to 32 police officers.
Okay. So yeah, I think we're 8 short, it's including one that we just had put in a resignation. I think we're at 24. So certainly when you look at 15 supervisors to 24 officers, that seems pretty high. That's I'm not real good with math, but one for every more than every 2, right? But at the same time, it might look like we're top heavy, but we're definitely light on the bottom. So I mean, if we were where we were supposed to be, we may still be a little heavy, and that's one thing that I know I kind of talked to the mayor about is having an audit of some sort done to make sure that we're kind of within best practices.
Great. Yeah, that's helpful. Thank you very much.
Sure.
Mr. Sanker?
2 things. I'll go one at a time in case somebody else has some. But, Chief, in referencing like the drug overdose individuals, if somebody's a repeat overdose individual, are we involved with that intervention program with the county where they'll come to the house and try to get them into rehab and that for multiple offenders? Or
I don't know if Chief Wallace from the fire department still goes out with him, or if Chandra, because at the time we were doing it as our own department. The department was doing it. At the time Lieutenant Fallon was here, he was going out with Chandra and Chief Wallace and a lady from Addiction Services, and trying to get people into, once a week, into some type of treatment if they were willing to go, or they're trying to at least get the ball rolling to get them into treatment. So since it's become strictly a county program, I don't think that they're still going out, but I will double check and I'll get you an answer on that.
Follow up. Chief, also, ever since the tragedy over at Seven Hills School with the 911 have we reviewed our process here, assure us that we, anything that might have been overlooked there would not be overlooked here? I'm sure there's always a stumbling block at some point in time. Everything can't be, perfect. But are we confident that our communication between 911 and our officers
I'm confident
there.
that it's strong and it's good, and that is something that the mayor got with me about really the next morning and asked that we review. So we are still in the process of looking at everything and making sure that there's nothing we're missing. I've asked Lieutenant Rankin is in charge of dispatch right now, and I'd asked that he get all the information that he can get from Cincinnati, but rightfully so, they're kind of slow. They're still going through the process. So once everything is done with them, and they can release all that information as a public record, we're going to get all that and look at it and just make sure there's nothing that we're missing, that something like that couldn't or shouldn't happen here. So
Good, thanks.
Is there anything else?
Thank you. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
We do not have other requests to address council, so we are moving on to unfinished business. Is there any unfinished business? Okay, moving on. Is there any new business? Mr. Bonsall?
Thank you, Madam President Pro Tem. I would like to announce that President of Council Donna Lake has scheduled a public hearing to discuss the 2019 tax budget. And that public hearing is going to be at the council meeting of June 12th, 2018. And the auditor and I will be working on the tax budget to present to Finance Committee and Council, and hopefully we will have that to the council members by the last meeting in May.
I think I heard you say there's a public hearing to discuss the 2019 tax budget scheduled for June 12th during the regular council meeting. Thank you, Mr. Bonsall. Is there any other new business? Mrs. Hanrahan?
I would just like to remind everybody of the citywide yard sale, May 11th and 12th, and to please go down to the community center and help out our seniors Friday and Saturday. Thank you.
Community yard sale, 11th and 12th this weekend. Thank you. Mr. Bonsall?
Thank you, Madam President Pro Tem. I just had a follow-up question to whoever, through the chair to whoever could answer it. I'm curious, where can residents get a list of the yard sale sites? I know in previous years it was on the city website. Do we expect that it's going to be added to the website again this year?
It is on the Clerk of Council site.
Oh, okay. Great.
We have two of them.
Any other new business? Mr. Bonsall?
Yeah, thank you, Madam President Pro Tem. So I just want to wish all of the mothers out there a happy Mother's Day, and also people that want to be mothers. Maybe they're trying and things just haven't worked out. So we're thinking about them as well. But yes, I just want the mothers to know that we appreciate everything that you do. You're literally raising the next generations, or have raised, the next generation. And, there's a reason, if we look back, there's a reason, there's a group of people that we call the greatest generation. The people that, fought in World War II. Or at least that age, and those people couldn't be the greatest generation if they didn't have moms to raise them and allow them to be the greatest generation. So, those moms did it then, and I know our moms are doing it now, so just really want to thank and appreciate them.
Thank you, Mr. Bonsall. Mr. Senker?
Yes, Madam President Pro Tem, two things. One, before the meeting, we actually had a moment of silence for two former city employees, and I would like to recognize both. Helen Jaspers was a longtime nurse with the health department. Helen was very aggressive. She was no bigger than a minute, but everybody respected her, and she had nothing but concern and compassion for the people that she worked with through the health department here in the city of Norwood. And when she retired, she was truly missed, and she'll truly be missed, to this day. Officer Schmidt was here for many, many years and retired. And what I kind of got a chuckle when Officer Buchanan said they had 118 citations written in the month of April. if Officer Schmidt was here, that'd be 336. He was very aggressive and was always looking to enforce traffic violations, no matter what or no matter who. So, but he was missed when he retired and was a great officer as well. So I do think, keep their families in your prayers, and will truly be missed. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sanker. I would also like to add that President of Council Donna Lake did indicate she has asked that a resolution be prepared for Helen Jaspers for our next meeting and plans to invite the family to attend.
Perfect. Thank you.
Is there any other, Mr. Braden?
Yeah, I think I'd be remiss if I didn't mention the talent of some of our council, one of our council members and our clerk of council. I attended our Holy Trinity Variety Show last week, and I just want to congratulate you guys on a great performance and commend you on your talents. Nice work.
Thanks, Sean. I'm glad you were there.
Thank you, Mr. Braden. Mr. Bonsall?
Yeah, thank you, Madam President Pro Tem. So I also attended a session of the Norwood Variety Show, and the Holy Trinity, the variety show there, and that was fantastic. It was very entertaining. It was wonderful. I mean, Mr. Sanker probably had the most outrageously awesome act of the night, and I just won't say any more about it, but it was a really great experience. I'd never actually been to one before, so that was my first, and next year is going to be their 50th year. I'm hoping that anybody else in the community that hasn't been should go that year, because it could be their last year, just because they're not getting a lot of people joining up, but they don't know that yet. They're still looking at it, but I will just tell you, it's a wonderful tradition in the city of Norwood. I know it originally started at St. Elizabeth's in West Norwood, and it's just a fantastic thing. So I want to thank you all for doing that. Also acknowledge our safety service director who was in the show, and then Jeff Gears, works for Public Works, was also in the show, and many more people. Jerry Oster. I can't even, if I start naming people, I'm going to forget them. But it was a great show. I really want to thank them for putting that on.
Thank you both.
Is the show at the same time next year?
Approximately, it'll be a little bit earlier.
It's late April?
It'll be about mid-April.
Mid-April?
Yeah.
All right, let's mark our calendars now. Mid-April, the 50th show, 50th year.
Well, Jeannie, excuse me.
Mr. Bonsall.
Thank you so much. So will Mr. Sanker's wife be doing the tickets as well next year, do you think?
Yes.
Excellent. So yeah, see Jeannie Sanker. So get your tickets early.
All right. Any other new business? Okay. We've got a communication then. We've got a communication from the mayor regarding request committee of the whole meeting.
Dear Madam President and members of council, I would like to request that a meeting of the Committee of the Whole be called on May 24th, 2018, so that I can give a report on 911. Should you have any questions, please do not hesitate to contact me. Sincerely, Thomas F. Williams, Mayor, City of Norwood.
Mr. Braden.
Yes, I'd like to make a motion that the letter be received and filed.
And that we schedule the meeting. Do we need?
Would you like to also motion that we schedule the meeting?
Sure.
Okay.
You got a date in mind? I don't get it.
So the motion on the floor from Mr. Braden is that we receive and file the letter and that we schedule the meeting for May 24th.
At 6 o'clock.
There is not a time indicated on the letter.
Yeah, 6 o'clock would work great.
Here at 6 o'clock would work great. That's a Thursday. Is a 6 o'clock. Mrs. Hanahan?
I cannot make that meeting. My son's graduating from high school and we have a mandatory event that night. I wonder if we could possibly do it like on that Wednesday. I mean, I would really hate to miss this meeting, getting information on 911. I think we've all been waiting for it. And just was wondering if that would be possible on the 23rd. Or I guess we can't change it if the mayor.
That was just.
The mayor is making a request for the 24th, and the suggested time was 6 p.m. Mrs. Hanrahan is saying that will not work for her. She's suggesting that we look at Wednesday, May 23rd.
It's better for me.
That the 23rd would work? Or Mr. Sanker?
Yes, ma'am. I would think we could respond back to the mayor, receive and file a letter, and the 23rd seems to work better for council if that works into his schedule as well, and see how that comes back, and then run that through the clerk's office.
Mr. Braden, would you like to amend your motion to receive and file the letter and have a letter from council sent to the mayor requesting a new meeting date?
Thank you, Madam President Pro Tem. Yes, I would.
Is there a second to that amended motion? Mrs. Hanrahan, is there any discussion? Mr. Bonsall?
Yeah, thank you so much, Madam President Pro Tem. I just want to express my excitement that we are going to now learn what the mayor's recommended direction for 911 and our emergency dispatch center is going to be. In our original fiscal recovery plan that we passed in July of 2017, it called for this exact kind of discussion or the plan to be presented. So I am excited that we are going to get that.
Is everyone still in agreement with the suggested 6 p.m. for the 23rd? Is there any more discussion? Call the roll, please.
Mr. Bonzall?
Yes.
Mr. Clark?
Yes.
Mr. Thompson?
Yes.
Ms. Stevenson?
Yes.
Mrs. Hanrahan?
Yes.
Mr. Sanker?
Yes, sir.
Mr. Braden?
Yes, sir.
All members present voted yes. That motion passes. We don't have any other communication. And we do have an absent member. You would think I'd remember that part. Mr. Clark.
Move to excuse the absent member.
Mr. Bonsall.
I'd like to second that motion.
Is there any discussion? I just want to thank you all. This is riveting if you ever get the moment to do this. I have great gratitude for our president of council.
You did great.
Yep.
Thank you. Mr.
Good
Braden.
Can I say one more thing before we?
Yeah, we're in discussion of the motion to excuse the absent member.
Okay, it's not about the absent member, so.
So
the president of council may call you out of order, but go ahead, take a shot.
we will table the motion while Mr. Braden makes a comment.
Thank you. I feel like I need to mention one more person through our discussion, through our variety shows. Mr. Mupper put on a pretty good show, too. I want to go ahead and put that out there. Mr. Mupper, he really did a great job, as well as Mr. Sanker and everybody else involved. So I don't want to go without mentioning Mr. Mupper.
Thank you, Mr. Braden. So
That was an question. That worked.
that was beautiful. The motion on the floor then is to excuse the absent member. Is there any more discussion? Okay, call the roll, please.
Mr. Bonzall?
Yes.
Mr. Clark?
Yes.
Mr. Thompson?
Yes.
Ms. Stevenson?
Yes.
Mrs. Hanrahan?
Yes.
Mr. Sanker?
Yes.
Mr. Braden?
Yes.
Mr. Clark?
I move that we adjourn.
Mr. Braden?
I second that.
Any discussion? All right, call the roll, please.
Mr. Bonzall?
Yes.
Mr. Clark?
Yes.
Mr. Thompson? Ms. Stevenson?
Yes.
Mrs. Hanrahan? Mr. Sanker?
Yes, sir.
Mr. Braden?
Yes, sir.
This meeting is hereby adjourned.